welcome everyone to another episode of the Scholars Table. Today we are very honored to have Professor Genberg, who is a distinguished faculty and professor of epidemiology, focusing on infectious diseases. She's the current director of the infectious disease tract, where I belong. So she's my track director here at the Hopkins School of Public Health. She brings a wealth of knowledge regarding the PhD application and the interview process. Since we are in the interview season, I found it very important to at least engage her to give us a brief overview or a detailed exploration of what it really entails to apply to a PhD, get interview, and then go through the interview process successfully in a top program like the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School. So let's welcome our special guests to get the conversation started. All right, so we have Professor Genberg with us today. Good morning and welcome to the Scholars Table. We're excited to have you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I know like I've been following up for a while now. Your schedule is quite busy, but we are very excited to finally have you on the Scholars Table, and I believe a lot of prospective applicants would really benefit from our conversation today. But before we start, could you share a bit about your journey in epidemiology and academia in general, and what has really inspired you to take this tract?
Sure. So I came to academia first following my undergraduate degree. I worked as a research assistant, and that's how I ended up enrolling in the MPH program. And I did my MPH at Johns Hopkins. And it was a very inspiring time for me. I got exposed to a lot of different aspects and facets of public health. And following that, I was working in research still, and I at an academic institution. And I found myself sort of hitting a wall, getting to a point where I wanted to ask more questions and figure out how to answer them, and didn't think I had the skills in my toolbox to be able to do so. And so that led me to think about applying for PhD programs. And I specifically wanted to focus on epidemiology because I wanted a really strong foundation in those methods and in study design. And I really wanted to be able to design and implement research studies. And my interests at the time were around HIV and HIV prevention. And so that naturally led me to wanting to focus on infectious diseases. And currently my work is focused still on HIV, but also on the intersection of infectious disease transmission and substance use epidemiology.
Awesome. So how long have you been at Hopkins? Since your MPH, you never left?
No, okay. So I did my MPH, and then I worked for a few years before applying for my PhD. I enrolled in the PhD, and then I left for my postdoc. I did a postdoctoral fellowship at Brown University, and following that, I was on faculty there for about 5 years, and then I came back to Hopkins. So my journey has been pretty Hopkins heavy, and I sometimes feel like I have been here for a very long time, but I did have a break for a few years, 7 years at Brown.
Okay. So you actually took that long time after the MPH before coming back for your PhD. Okay, yeah. That's good to know. But so I want us to understand what the PhD application process really entails. From your perspective and an experience dealing with admissions at Hopkins and elsewhere, what would you say are the key components of a successful application?
So I think first and foremost, we look for people who have interest and coursework in public health, in fields related to public health. And specifically, when you're applying to a PhD in epidemiology, we look to see whether you have some quantitative background, some skills in that area as well. But that's just kind of the starting point. Really, there is no formula to say exactly what the best and most successful applications look like. We consider a diversity of components of the application, and aside from academic experience and excelling in academic environments, and we also look to see whether you have experience either professionally in the field or in research. And really, the candidates who do bring some of that real world experience do the best, I think, because it demonstrates an ability to understand the context within which the research is based. And then I would say from there, we really do look at your statement, your personal statement, to try to understand what your motivation is for applying to this program and what you plan to do in the long term. And then, the last piece would be letters of reference. We really want to see what do people say about how, they evaluate your potential success. And we look for applicants whose letters of reference really do point toward people who would be successful at becoming independent researchers.
Okay, so I know you mentioned the elements. You mentioned a statement of purpose as part of the critical components, but
Yeah.
could you shed a bit light on what element are you actually looking at if you're reading somebody's statement of purpose? What are some of the elements you're looking that points that this person could be a strong candidate?
I often say with the personal statement, or the statement of purpose, as you're calling it, I want it to be mostly forward looking. And I think this surprises candidates and applicants sometimes because, you want to take advantage of the opportunity to tell us your story and how you got where you are today. And that is important. But it should be about a third of what you talk about. We really want to see more thoughtful discussion about where you want to go next. Why do you want to come to our institution? Why do you want to do this degree now? Why are you even interested in pursuing a PhD in epidemiology? And what's your plan over the short, medium, and long term for using this degree, and in what ways? So we really do look for those forward thinking pieces in the statement of purpose, and they really are critical for helping us to evaluate your potential for success, not only in the program but in the field. Also, it really helps us to think about where will you fit in, what are the kinds of things you want to work on, and who might you be well suited to work with.
Okay, so in essence, it's not only about your journey so far. It's not about started off as a kid and dreaming about saving lives and all that. You want to see what?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
that's important, right? We want to know a little bit about you. We try as much as possible to make it personal, because those are the things that really help you stand out, is to make it uniquely about you and your journey. And we do want to know a little bit about that. But we don't need the whole life story, right? I think you can pick out some key components of your journey that has led you to this moment, and why this is the right time for you to have, to take this next step in your career, and why it should be a PhD, why it should be a PhD in epi, and why it should be a PhD in epi at this particular institution.
Yeah. So, in terms of recommendations,
Mhm.
what would you say makes a strong recommendation, or say a very compelling recommendation?
I think first and foremost, it really helps for these to be personal. And this is a nice way for you, again, to share with us pieces of your story through the eyes of the folks who you've worked with, and who know you well. And so it's really great to get a sense of who a person is through these letters. So I can't emphasize that enough. You don't want just a kind of formulaic letter that someone is kind of filling in your name, and it could be basically for anyone. We really want to see that this is a person who knows you well, who can speak to your strengths, who can speak to your weaknesses, who understands kind of what your trajectory is and where you're headed, and can even speak to why they think you would be a great fit for our program. And so those are the ones that really stand out when we read a letter that is very convincing in terms of it's clear that the person knows you really well and can evaluate, your performance in whatever capacity you know them, and can really give us an insight as to your potential and your potential for success.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for that insight. So far we've tried to understand what the PhD application process is, and I think a key component of some programs is the interview. And I know a lot of prospective applicants really get anxious when it's time for interviews. So I want us to take some time and break it down so that viewers would understand what it really entails. So in terms of preparing for interviews, what are the most important aspects that candidates should look out for when they are preparing for a PhD interview?
I should say, when you are offered the chance to interview, you should feel extremely proud of that accomplishment. At least in our program, we have way more applicants than we could ever imagine accepting. And when you're offered an interview, it's because you've already reached and exceeded a bar in terms of being a candidate that demonstrates potential and has, the right set of factors that we think, would lead to success in our program. So really, the interview is a chance for us to get to know you, to hear you articulate some of the things you may have talked about in your application and your statement of purpose, and to really try to do that next piece, which is thinking about whether you'd be a good fit for our program. So because of that, I think what I often counsel people to think about in preparation for these interviews is to really try as much as possible to get to know the place where you're interviewing. It can be really hard to do that just online, right? Because you can look at faculty profiles, you can try to read some papers, you can try to figure out what current research is ongoing in a department, you can learn about the curriculum. I really strongly encourage people to reach out ahead of the interview season and talk to faculty, and really start to learn about what it is they're working on and how you can see yourself fitting in well in this environment. Because that's really the thing that we're assessing during the interview is whether you would be a good fit for us in our program working with our faculty.
Okay. So you advise prospective applicants, even before they put in the application, they should reach out to faculty to try and see whether they can get a meeting scheduled. But I know faculty at Hopkins very, very busy and elsewhere. I remember when I was applying, I sent a lot of emails. I got like maybe 2% response.
Yeah.
So that becomes quite difficult. And
For sure.
yes, and there are also certain programs that I'm told reaching out to faculty doesn't really improve your chances, or it doesn't guarantee that you will get accepted.
So yeah, I want to be really clear. Having that contact with the faculty in no way means that, your application moves up higher on the list or anything like that. But what it gives you is insight into the environment in which you're hoping to come and learn, right? So
Yeah.
it's about trying to get as much of that insight into what it's like to be a student here. So another idea is to reach out. I always refer people to our academic office because they would be happy to, connect you with a current student. They would be happy to help give you information about the program itself and what are the things that we focus on in terms of our curriculum and the types of research studies that students do. So as much as possible, I get it. Faculty are busy. We have pretty hectic schedules. So I understand that it's not always the easiest thing to do to reach out to a faculty and try to make that connection. But you can, as I said, read up, see what they're working on, and see whether that's interesting to you and how you might fit into some projects that faculty are working on. But as much insight as you can get, I think, into the way that a program works and what kinds of people are on faculty and our students, I think is really just helpful to see whether you're a good fit. You're evaluating us as well, right?
Yeah. Um, so I want us to talk about some common questions that applicants should expect. In your experience, what would you say are some of the common questions that PhD candidates should expect that at least 5 of these questions will be asked or more? So maybe if you can take us through those 5 questions, and then we'll try and talk a bit detail into each of these ones.
Sure. I mean, I think we often start with just trying to learn from you why you're applying to the program. So your motivation, basically, for applying to the PhD program. And then I think we often will ask questions about what, in your experience, whether it be personal, professional, academic, do you think has best prepared you for this program and for not only our rigorous curriculum, but to conduct research and to do a dissertation. We really want to get a sense of what your interests are. And I can't emphasize this enough. It will come up in the interview. We want to understand what excites you. What are you passionate about? What do you want to work on? And I often say, this is not set in stone. Nobody's going to go back and say, hey, during your interview, you said you were going to work on this. Not at all, but it gives us some insight into kind of where you may fit in within our faculty. We have a very large faculty, so we really want to understand, who might you best work with. And so I think those are kind of the main things that we focus on. It's really just trying to get to know you, get to know what you're interested in, and hear from you why you think you're ready for this degree and what has prepared you to do it.
Okay, and I think you made like a good point about nobody's gonna hold you up, or nobody's gonna remind you that you said you were interested in this, so why are you doing this?
No,
Right.
I mean, as you know, right? Things change, and I would say it would be the most rare experience to come in and have a set of in mind and to actually do
Yes.
those.
Yes. I mean, when I was preparing to present my aims, I think one faculty member asked me, Banda, I thought you were interested in HIV. So what happened? So I had to explain the whole thing again. So as you said, I mean, trying to at least convey what interests you is a huge part of the interview process. I want you to walk us through how you approach some of these common questions. So, for example, if in your interview you are asked, "Can you tell us about yourself?" or what excites you? Why do you? Okay, so let's start with, can you tell us about yourself? That's question that seems very easy but get a lot of students into trouble.
Yeah, I think I would definitely practice answering this question because part of it too is you're only going to have about maybe 25 minutes to talk to faculty. So you want to be able to succinctly share a little bit about who you are, tell us a little bit about your past in terms of your academic experience and your research experience, maybe what you've been working on recently, and then, something about where you might want to go as far as your next steps as a PhD student. And it's always great to make it personal. So if you can, share something outside of work, I think everyone kind of appreciates knowing people in a full rounded way as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. And how about answering why you want to pursue a PhD? What is the better way to approach that question?
I mean, I think just be honest, right? People have different reasons for wanting to take this next step in their career. Um, I think a common kind of trajectory is like mine, right? Where I said I had gotten a master's degree, I was working in research, I was working in an academic environment, and I felt limited by what I could do and what I knew how to do, and that independence. And so um, I think doing as much as you can to think really carefully about why you want to take this next step, but also why now. Why are you in a time in your career where this is the right next step for you? And what has really kind of motivated you to get to this point? It's really helpful to hear from candidates um, why they've gotten to this phase, and it's not just kind of because it's the next thing they feel like they should do. There's this is I say pretty often that it's at least 4 years of your life. You're going to work really hard, you're going to spend a lot of time, so you want to make sure that this is something that you're really ready to do and
Yeah,
invested in, and that you have great reasons for wanting to do it.
yeah. I think that's very very important. So how do you differentiate that question from a question like what are your research interests? How do you approach answering your research interest in an interview setting?
Yeah, I think that the most common mistake I see here is not being specific enough. So I want to know beyond just the fact that you're interested in the epidemiology of infectious diseases, right? I know that already. Otherwise, why would we be here? I want to know, maybe it's a specific pathogen that interests you. Why does it interest you? What's interesting about it? Maybe it's a specific method. There's something that you're really fascinated by and you want to learn more about, or you want to apply in a certain way. Again, no one's holding anybody to these details as far as like if you say this is the thing you want to do, you're going to have to do it. But we really want to just see what excites you, and to understand, at least right now, where do you think you want to go with this training, and what do you want to specialize in, right? I mean, we do about a year of coursework, which is pretty general actually, and then as you get further into the program, you specialize, and so we want to understand on what pathways are you going to kind of start to make those types of decisions to specialize.
Okay, so in terms of specificity, are we looking at actually having a research question in mind, or just understanding that I want to work in, for example, I want to work on coronaviruses, or I want to work with, say, HIV. That
Mhm.
is enough, or you should have a clear research question at the time of interview.
I don't think you need to have a clear research question. I think you need to be able to articulate, if you wanted to work in HIV, well, what aspect of it, If you wanted to work on coronavirus, tell us more about what aspect of coronavirus interests you. And again, this doesn't need to be to the point of I've got a fully fleshed out research question. You're going to learn how to do that, right? That's part of why you're applying to and going to matriculate into a PhD program, is to really think more and learn more about how to ask good research questions. So no one expects you to be able to do that. But we want to understand, well, what are these sparks for you? What are the things that are really exciting for you about HIV? Give us a little bit more context so that we can understand. Again, it's all about where would you fit in, and what are the pathways that we think you might take once you arrive on campus and start the program.
Okay, awesome. One other question that comes up a lot is, how have you prepared for this program? What is the best way to answer that?
I think there's a variety of different ways that are acceptable in terms of thinking about how to answer that question. We want to see that you understand what it will take to be a doctoral student in our department. So, you have been in environments in the past in which you were asked to do things that were challenging, how you succeeded in those situations, and what are the things that you bring along with you that you might have gained either as skills or as background knowledge. So that could be something like a thesis when you were an undergraduate student and what that was like, or it could be something like particular courses that you took in a master's degree. There's many different ways that you can answer that question, but we want to understand from you that you have some experiences that would be similar to what we are going to ask you to do, and that you feel like you were successful at those things. And so you can think about in your life, what are the things that have prepared you, and kind of share with us what you think those key experiences have been.
Okay. I think that's been clearly explained. In terms of asking, or in terms of responding to a question about why our program, or why do you want to come to Hopkins, or why do you want to come to, let's say, University of Maryland, what do you think applicants should focus on?
I think there are a number of different ways to think about answering this question too. Oftentimes, this is about a particular area of interest that you might have, that you see, that there are a number of faculty who work in a particular area, and that's what's drawing you to our institution. Other times it might be more specific about the type of opportunities or experiences that students are offered in a particular institution, and that is kind of something that you are seeking out. Again, it's a little bit about doing a little bit of homework to understand what the program is like, what the institution is like, what the department that you're entering is like, so that you're telling us what about those things is really appealing to you and motivating you to want to join our institution. And it's kind of specific, right? It's not just because you've heard that Hopkins is the best place to go. We want more information from you about why you think this is the right place for you to train, because it will help you accomplish some of the goals that you're looking to accomplish, and help you to take those next steps towards your longer term career goals.
Can you, for example, talk about the stipend being attractive?
Say again?
Or it's a bad idea. Can you talk about the stipend being attractive, being one of the reasons why you want to come to the specific program? Yes.
Yeah, I think for now in our department, we are in a position where we're able to offer admitted students tuition support, as well as a stipend. And I think you know, there are comparable programs at other institutions. So I think it's definitely a consideration, but I wouldn't say it should be your lead motivation. I think there should be other reasons why, um, this is something that this department and this program is the right fit for you.
I know, like most interviews end with asking applicants to, if they have any questions to ask. What would you say some of the compelling questions that students can ask the interview panel that shows that they are clearly interested in the program?
Yeah, this is a really great question. First, I'll just say there shouldn't be a situation in which you have no questions. I hope that's clear to everyone. You're applying to this particular program because you're a curious person, right? So the interview, it's your opportunity to interact with faculty and to ask whatever questions are on your mind about the program, about the faculty, about students, about life in Baltimore. There's so many different ways that you can approach this. I just want to make sure everyone's clear. Just don't get into a situation where you say, oh, I don't have any questions, because that would not be viewed favorably. And so I think, some of the best questions I've heard are students. Again, I know I'm sort of hitting on a similar theme here with my answers to your questions, but is trying to get to know the place a little bit more. And so that could be, to ask a question about what student life is like. It could be to ask a question about what are the faculty like, and what are their interests, and just trying to get more information about the department and about the school. Because I think, that's really, unless you have been here previously as a student, or you've worked in the institution, that's the hardest thing to try to understand, before you're a part of the community. And so any kinds of questions that you can ask that will help you to gain that insight, I think are viewed favorably.
Okay, so I want us to explore some common mistakes that you've seen applicants make during the interview process. What would you say are some of the grave mistakes that once that is made, then automatically the person, the chances of the person getting admitted is, dramatically reduces?
Okay, so I've mentioned a couple already. I would say first mistake is to not have any questions for us. The second mistake would be not being specific enough in what your interests are and what areas you would like to work in. And then I think the other potentially common mistake would be to not answer the question. So, you're going to be asked a very specific question by the faculty. And this is okay. So, like when you're a student, you'll learn that sometimes faculty ask questions and you're not following. And, it's a little bit of like, can you guess what's in my brain? We always say in those situations, ask for clarification. If you don't understand a question, please make sure that you ask, what is it exactly that you're asking? Or can you repeat yourself, or can you rephrase that? Because we want to be sure that you get the best chance that you can possibly get in sharing information with us. So I would say the worst mistake to make is to not fully answer a question, right? And so I want to make sure that that's not ever happening because you don't understand what the question is.
Okay, and I think that is quite common. I mean, at least I've experienced that before in one of my interviews. Most of the time, I think is a anxiety of trying to go through the interview, even if you don't hear a question, you want to answer it. Like you are not comfortable. I don't think people are most time comfortable asking interviewers to repeat their question, so they assume what they've heard and then start answering. But I think it's very important to seek the clarification before taking a shot at it. I know, like, occasionally you may have challenging questions that you've not, thought of. You prepare for the most common questions, maybe 30 common questions to expect in your PhD interview, and then you get to the PhD interview and you get a totally different question, at least one. How would you approach it? How would you advise students to approach such a question or such a situation?
It's such a good question. I would say you should count on the fact that you'll get at least one question you hadn't anticipated. There's always one question that comes up that feels like it's far afield. But so I would say a few things. One is that we know you have maybe a set of things in your mind that you want to communicate with us, that you want to make sure that you've told us. And I think sometimes what students do is that in these situations where they're not prepared for a question that comes up, they'll just go to their script and they'll start talking about the things they want to make sure that they've told us, right? Remember, we've read your application. We've read it really carefully. We know a lot of the details about you already. And I get that this is your opportunity to shine, and we want you to shine. We want you to share all of the amazing accomplishments that you've had in your life. But I would say don't just go to the script as my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice would be it's okay to take a beat. Take a deep breath, collect your thoughts. We totally understand that this is a stressful situation, and we want you to do your best. No one's looking for you to try to trap you or to catch you. That's not at all what we're trying to do. So take a minute, collect your thoughts, and answer as best as you possibly can. And again, going back to what I said before, if it's something where you're like, I really have no idea, it's also okay to not know, every answer. Generally speaking, we're going to ask you things about yourself. So you should be able to answer most of the questions that we ask you. No one is going to ask you a knowledge question or, to answer something about, a recent paper or something like that, to tell us what it found. That's generally not the kinds of things that we ask. So you should feel confident that no matter what question gets asked of you, you'll be able to answer it because it's something about you, and that's really what we want to know.
Okay. Thank you so much for these insightful information. Any advice before we wrap up? Any advice for PhD applicants, especially international students?
Yeah, I would say for all students, again, don't be shy at reaching out. I understand that it can feel intimidating to reach out to faculty, but we're all here, and we all really are excited about being a part of the training program, and we really, take our educational mission seriously. So feel free to reach out, even if it's just to have a chat, a conversation, even if it's not, application season or, the time of year when interviews are happening. Reach out and try to make those connections, because I really do think it can enhance your application to have a good sense of the faculty and of the department. I think for international students, I would go back to the advice about like making sure you're understanding questions as they're being asked. If there's any language concerns, making sure that that's not a barrier, that you're really understanding the questions that are being asked of you during an interview, and even on the application itself, that you really understand what it is that we're trying to get at, and so we're open to answering questions about the application as well. And then I would say the other thing is to put your work and your experience in context for us. Because a lot of times, if you're coming from a different country, you may get a faculty member who's familiar with that context, and you may get a faculty member reviewing your application who is not familiar with that context. So to help us understand a little bit about the place in which you work, and what how your experiences and accomplishments stand out in that context is really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. But before we go, final question. How is the interview scored? Is there like a scorecard where each question is given a specific mark, or is just pass fail?
Oh, good question. So I'm going to say neither. What we really do, I'm not just saying it. We're really trying to get to know you, and it's a little bit like matchmaking. It is a process of, you're all outstanding by the time you get to the interview. That's just a fact. And so, it is really about assessing fit. And so that is really how we evaluate the interview. We do pay attention to things like composure, to things like how well you communicate, your ability to answer questions. Yes, we do pay attention to that. And if someone is not able to communicate well, then they're not going to, do as well. But our evaluation is more qualitative in nature. It's not quantitative. We really do kind of look to see and consider all of the factors in terms of whether or not you're the right fit for us and we're the right fit for you.
Okay, so there's no there's no pass or fail.
No, there's no pass or fail. This is not graded.
Okay, good to know.
Speaking, we do the interview with people who we can imagine being a part of our program, right? So we're not you've already kind of gotten over that hurdle. And so then it's a little more just a finer point on that to really assess and try to sort out how you would do in our program, and whether there's a particular faculty member that we can see you working well with and who can meet your goals. And so it is about assessing that fit.
Okay, good to know. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been really engaging and insightful. And I'm very sure that the applicants would really find it very resourceful. Thank you for making the time out of your busy schedule to be with us. We truly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a real pleasure, and best of luck to all of the future applicants. Look forward to reviewing your applications.
Thank you.